Welcome again to Joe Stunner Boxing. I want to talk about Jared Anderson because I keep hearing about how he's been completely exposed by Martin Bakole and how he was never any good and how his career's finished and all this nonsense. Look, there's no doubt that Anderson got a rude awakening against Bakole. His defence was exposed. I think we knew his defence weren't great. He was in there against a much bigger man. A guy who was, what did he weigh? Bakole, 280 something, 285 or something, 283, something like that. He got clipped, he got put over a few times. Yeah, it was a bad day at the office. But this idea that because he's suffered one loss against a more experienced fighter, which was a stoppage loss, and he was floored a few times. This idea that his career is over and that he's rubbish is just nonsensical and kind of smacks of the sort of ignorance of most so-called boxing fans who still buy into this cult of the idea of the zero, I've never lost, therefore I must be, without question, brilliant. Well, it's an achievement, being undefeated. But if you think that the odd loss or two, or losses in general, somehow define a fighter, or put it this way, are things that a fighter can't come back from, then I'm afraid you're very naive. Now look, Anderson, number one, let's look at the idea that he's got a glass jaw. Okay, so Anderson got floored in the first round. At the end of the first round, a round he was winning and looking quite impressive in, he got floored with what was essentially a four-punch combination. Okay, the big chopping right hand. He stayed slap bang in front of Bakole. Bakole landed it. Anderson was low, buzzed him badly. Bakole followed up. I suppose it wasn't a four-punch combination, but there were four punches in quick succession, and the other three put him over. Okay, he got up, and it was towards the end of the round, so he had that advantage of being able to recuperate. In the second round, he didn't look too bad. He came out, and he wasn't, even though it was a heavy knockdown, he was able to get back to what he was doing and have some scoring shots and yeah, okay, he was okay in that second round. Throughout the fight, Bakole definitely had an ominous look about him, like he was going forward, looking very menacing. Certainly once Bakole started to actually, instead of just completely ignoring it, use the jab, he was able to pretty much control Anderson. He got him on the ropes a few times. Anderson bobbed and weaved, managed to stay out of trouble, but there was always the feeling if Bakole hits him again, he can go down. And sure enough, in the fifth round, there was that huge uppercut, which would have probably floored a rhinoceros, that put Anderson rolling under the rope, on his back, leg in the air, a real heavy knockdown. Now, a lot of fighters wouldn't have got up from that, but Anderson did. And then he was still buzzed, understandably. Bakole was all over him, got him on the floor again, and then shortly afterwards, the ref stopped the fight. But in terms of Anderson having a bad chin, I would say he didn't display the greatest chin. He didn't display a, peak Marius Vac chin. But he got up from those very heavy knockdowns and fought back. And that brings us to the second point, which is his determination and his courage and his will to win. Because people had cast aspersions on this prior to this fight because he said he wants to retire at 27. He don't really watch boxing and, he's not really a fan of it and so on and so forth. Well, for someone who supposedly his heart isn't really in it, he showed an awful lot of heart. A lot of heart. He was... After in the second round, he was coming back. I mean, he was always trying to win. He was pretty much fighting fire with fire against Bakole, which, when you consider how heavy the knockdowns were, that's you might say that's a foolish thing to do. But it certainly doesn't show a lack of heart. It shows a pretty determined man. The other thing to remember is that he's 24, which is a baby for a heavyweight. To put it into perspective, that's a couple of years younger than Daniel Dubois. Okay, I mean, let's get some perspective here. Yes, he lost that fight and he lost it heavily. But at 24 years of age, he probably isn't as physically powerful as he's going to be. And another thing to mention is experience. A lot of the knock against Anderson was, well, he hasn't got experience against top-level people, which is probably true. He's all offense and no defense. That's another criticism. Again, it holds water, but does it mean he can't work on those aspects of his game? Does it mean that this is, rather than just a devastating career ender, is it not a learning curve? Is it not a rude awakening, a very rude awakening, a baptism by fire? He now knows what he's got to do. He's got to work on that defense. He's got to tighten it up. The art of boxing is when you lock together the offense and the defense. So, the moment something's coming back at you, you immediately, without even thinking about it, get your defense in place. Footwork as well as hands. You don't pull back in straight lines with your head up in the air. You don't do the obvious fundamental amateur things. You use the angles. You try and offset the guy's offense, and then you come back with your own offense. Anderson, I think this is something he clearly needs to work on. And of course, if his defense improves, then his, if there are any chinks in his chin, it will reduce the amount of opportunities for opponents to land punches on them and exploit those problems. Now, I remember following Nigel Benn from virtually the start of his career right up to the end. And his first defeat was against Michael Watson. And essentially he quit. He was just exhausted. I don't mean he quit in the sense that he did it in a cowardly way or whatever. He was just exhausted and he was demoralised and he quit. He kind of got up at 9.5. The referee called it off and he didn't complain. He actually went over and embraced Watson straight away. But the thing was, a lot of people made the criticisms. I remember this back in, 89, I think? 89, I think. I remember the criticisms of Ben were exactly the same as they are now against Anderson. And Ben came back, he went to America, he kind of rebuilt from the ground up, and he made himself into a fighter who was able to show levels of fortitude, the like of which few fighters have ever shown against, well, most prominently against Gerald McClellan in that extraordinary fight. At 24, Jared Anderson can do the same thing if he wants to. And he said after the fight, well, I made mistakes, didn't listen to my corner, and I'm going to go away and work on it, no problem. I like that attitude, all right? Because again, if you're saying that this guy is finished, I think you're making a big, big, big mistake, And I think we have to stop with this idea that a defeat defines a fighter, whereas all of his previous victories mean nothing. That suddenly, a defeat that reveals a few flaws in the makeup suddenly destroys everything good that we've previously looked at. No fighter or very, very, very few fighters are infallible, and all fighters, without exception, can be beaten if they meet the right person at the right time. So I think we need to just calm down a little bit here. Jared Anderson is not finished. There were some issues he had to face. Issues he now has to face, where he has to look at his sort of fistic makeup and say, okay, I need to work on that. I need to do that. He needs to live the life. He needs to, go in hard and training and listen to his trainer, make sure everything's as it should be with his diet, with his lifestyle. And then if he wants to carry on, there is absolutely no reason why he can't come back. And don't forget, Martin Bakole has a defeat on his record. And that defeat is to a guy who was a cruiserweight, who is making his debut at heavyweight, Michael Hunter. And I know people have said about Bakole he injured his shoulder, which I believe is the case. But essentially, he did look like he was going to quit in that fight, definitely, and appeared to be rather glad when it was all over. He didn't show at the time the level of fortitude that Gerard Anderson showed in this fight. because Anderson was still on his feet. He was still looking to get up and fight. He didn't quit. He didn't take the count. He didn't quit at all. He was like, I'm going out on my shield. You want to beat me, you can beat me, but you ain't getting anything off me. I respect that. And I think we need to be a little bit careful when we talk about Anderson. And I'm eager to see how he comes back. I think that's often the fascinating thing about some fighters when they get defeated, how they're going to come back. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Jared Anderson. Let me know what you think. If you share my views, if you disagree with them, that's fine. Leave your comments below. And of course, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, hit the like button and spread the word about Joe Stunner Boxing. Much love to all of you. Get you later. Bye for now.